What? New background? What's this about? So I'm back with another video this week, but we're not practicing together this week. And no, we aren't going to talk about how that means that I'm not playing my instrument this week. This week is the week that I reveal my love of research to you. I went into university, knowing I was really attached to the performance aspect of music. I love performing, and when I was younger, I really thought the direction for my career would be performing music full time. I'm a little bit older and a little bit wiser now, and I realized performing music as a classical musician is a little bit more tricky than I thought it would be. It's not impossible. It's just going to take me some time. Thanks to 4 years of music school though, I now realize that I truly have a passion for researching music and talking about what makes music so great. That's my theory nerd coming out a little bit there. In addition to music theory kind of research, I am also really interested in the social impact of music. I would say I'm more interested in that than in the music theory kind of aspect. So rather than thinking backwards through a composer's process, I would say that's a bit of what music theory is. I find that really interesting, but what I find even more interesting is the social reception of that music. The arts influence a lot in society, and society then influences the arts, and I'm really interested in that relationship between the people and the art. Art has a lot to say about society, and it's not always clear upon first glance or listen. I think next I want to transition to zines. Please let me know in the comments if you have ever heard of a zine, and if you haven't heard of a zine before, that's also okay. I think it's short for magazine, and it's like a self-published magazine-like piece of print. They're really big in the visual arts world, which kind of makes sense. A lot of people produce zines as a way to share their photography. Me though, I want to use zines to share my musical research. Hello, little girl. I have a pet rat, by the way. This video will be a sort of teaser for the articles that I'm working on. My articles will be available on my website for a free download. I also hope to figure out the logistics of printing. Wow. I want to publish zines, but I haven't figured out how to print a zine yet. In the future, I hope to figure out the logistics of printing hard copies of my articles in a full little zine booklet. But for right now, all I am able to offer is a free digital download. When my downloads launch on the website, I will make sure to comment that link down below so you guys can find it. Enough blabbing about what's going on here. Let's get into the articles, what they're about, why I wanted to write them. After you have heard a little bit of what they're about, you can decide if you want to read the whole thing or not. This just has my notes on it. If I'm looking down, that's why. My collection of zines, I have named it very unoriginally Sarah's Zines. Before I get into the actual content of the articles, I should let you know why you can trust my research. So I have a Bachelor of Music. As I mentioned in the start, I was very focused on performance. I was enrolled in many performance-based classes, but other favorite classes included the theory classes. Thank you, Dr. Lung, where we discussed modern music. So we're talking like 20th century and 21st century music. Analyze that from a music theory perspective, and we also spent some time discussing when and where background context was necessary from a music theorist's point of view. I also took a couple classes where we focused on popular music. So the most recent class I took in popular music was called Gender and Pop Music, but we actually discussed not only gender issues and how those are presented in popular music, but we also discussed other social justice issues and how those come up in popular music. And that tied into a class I took before called Music and Resistance, where we discussed protests, again, social justice and social issues, how music uplifted and empowered protesters, this kind of stuff. I'm furthering these discussions now with my own research. I'm doing the best research I can, having credentials such as a Bachelor of Music, and I also have a diploma in arts management. In my arts management classes, we talked a lot about arts advocacy. That is kind of the hidden role of arts leaders. It's when you're applying for grants or when you're looking for donors, you have to explain to them why should they donate or why should they give the grant to this arts organization. Why not this other arts organization somewhere else? Why not this hospital? Why not this university? Why not this public school or this private school? So coming straight out of that arts management degree, I figured before I can get involved in research about these social issues in music, I needed to explain to my audience why. What is the point in studying all these issues in conjunction with music? This is why my first zine, little collection of articles, I'm calling it Arts Advocacy. I was thinking that's what I could name my entire collection rather than Sarah's Zines. It could be The Arts Advocate, but I wasn't really vibing with it. It seemed kind of misleading for what the long-term content would be. The first article I want to present is titled Advocating for the Arts. Sort of the idea that I need to explain why the arts are worth studying before I can present stuff studying the arts. That was the idea behind the article, and then I started writing it, and I think it kind of went in a different direction. Let's see, right now it's relying a lot on my personal experience. You can't just publish an article about your personal experiences, and not when you're a person who's just starting out in research, maybe in 50 years. That would be acceptable. I do open up this article with my personal experiences of arts education in public schools. Many people are aware that the arts education of public schools is really just not good enough. It's not good enough to get enough people involved in the arts afterwards. In North America, I think that a lot of arts education is being done privately, which can be really inaccessible for a lot of people. Arts lessons cost a lot, but that's not what this article is about. An article about accessibility of the arts will come later, I promise. This article is more about, I say it in my first sentence of the article, is I always felt a sort of reluctance for arts education, not only from the teachers but from my peers as well. Like, music class and art class is just kind of a waste of time. That is the vibe I was feeling from my classmates, and it broke my heart in two. Feeling this reluctance to learn the arts from my fellow students, and I wonder now, where did that reluctance come from? Who told them that the arts are not valuable? So I kind of always wondered, like, in their perspective, what makes sports and what makes science so much more valuable than the arts? Then I sort of consider my earliest experience. I talk specifically about music education here. The curriculum demanded teaching of the arts way too late in our development. At the point where they started teaching us about the arts in public school, all of our habits and hobbies had already become developed. When they started teaching us music, the class was kind of on all different kinds of levels. My classmates who, similar to me, had private music lessons, we were so far ahead of the other 99% of our classmates. Maybe it was more like 95 and 5%. When you're that teacher and you're given maybe 30 minutes a week, you could even say an hour, 1 hour in an entire week, and you're with 30 kids, 5 of whom have already exceeding expectations of the curriculum, and then the other 25 who have no idea what's going on. What I'm trying to say here is that the curriculum really sets up the majority of kids to have a really confusing and frustrating experience when they're first learning the arts. I kind of get it now. If I was one of those other kids, a kid who didn't have private music lessons, and I was watching these other kids who had progressed way beyond what I would ever be able to understand in this subject, I can completely understand why they decided to not want anything to do with that subject. Because as we know, there's a lot of competition in school, like who has the best mark. There can only be one person who got the highest mark, right? Because they get all the freaking awards at the school awards, and then you feel like a loser. And then combine all that with the actual fact that they have teachers out here teaching the arts, but the teachers have little to no knowledge in the artistic subject that they're teaching. So now I can kind of understand where this reluctance for arts education comes from both sides, the teacher and the student side. Now that we've kind of worked through that, next we need to understand why the arts are important to learn, why we should be teaching them earlier, and why they are a valuable subject to society. I haven't written that part of my article yet. You'll have to go and download it if you want to learn that second part of the article. I'm going to move on to explaining the second article I'm coming out with. Let's take a deep breath. Maybe drink some water. My second article is a bit lighter. It's kind of this fun list of tips and tricks from me to you about how to get into listening to classical music. I wanted to rate this because I had a lot of trouble starting to listen to classical music. $17 for a photo from a Cuban artist. Every day it falls off my wall. Diving into a new genre of music is really daunting, and classical music is especially daunting because you have hundreds of years to catch up on here, okay? You might be getting recommendations from people who are already fans of classical music. That's great. One recommendation could be 2 minutes, but it could be an hour long. But first tip right off the start, keep it short and sweet. If you already have to basically force yourself to listen to this music because you want to get into it the way that I was and still kind of am, you don't want to be stuck listening to something that's an hour long. If you go in thinking it's going to be boring, then you're going to get really bored and upset if you force yourself to listen to an hour's worth of new music. Classical music takes a long time to figure out how to listen for the patterns. It's not like popular music where the patterns are so simple. We've been growing up listening to the radio or whatever your parents play, likely popular music, so you have subconsciously learned how to listen to those patterns. You likely haven't learned how to listen to classical music. That's why I started listening to this kind of music in my bachelor's degree, because they taught me how to listen to the music. That was really the topic of our 20th and 21st century music theory classes, was how to listen to this music that seemingly has no patterns. This article is more generally for classical music if you're just getting into it. Listen to famous music and listen to the greatest hits. These are not the same. Famous music more refers to the classical music that you hear in commercials, movie, TV, that kind of thing. If you're a fan of the Formula One races, which I am, there's a classical music selection in there that you will most certainly recognize. At the end, when they get the trophies and they're spraying the champagne over there, you know what's playing is the overture to Bizet's Carmen opera. There's famous music right there that you'll recognize. Greatest hits, however, would be exactly what it is. The greatest hits of classical music. These are the famous pieces of music to the classical world, not to the world, to the classical world. Anything Beethoven would be a greatest hit of classical music. See, Fur-Elise by Beethoven would fall into the famous music category, but Beethoven's Fifth and Beethoven's Ninth would they would probably still fall into the famous music category because they definitely use those in film and media. But maybe something like Beethoven's Fourth Symphony or his Seventh Symphony would fall into the greatest hits. Other greatest hits would include Bach's collection of preludes and fugues, Chopin's nocturnes. Some of Chopin's nocturnes would probably fall into famous music. Either way, you guys get the point. Listen to the famous music and the greatest hits, because you're likely to already recognize some of those. If you play an instrument, look for music written for that instrument, try to play it, listen to recordings of it, and try to play it again. I know what you're thinking here. Oh, my instrument doesn't have anything written for it in the classical music catalog. Unless you play saxophone, I think you're wrong. If you play guitar, guess what? There's a whole bunch of classical guitar music out there. A lot of people play piano. Guess what? There's a frick ton of classical piano music out there. If you need recommendations, comment your instrument, say help, I want to find classical repertoire for this instrument, and I will do my best to help you. For me, playlists. What I've been doing with my playlists is I'll put in a whole bunch of pop music and I'll insert classical selections in between that. When I'm just randomly putting on my playlist and I hit shuffle, I always have my stuff on shuffle. Then my playlist surprises me by putting on classical. That might get you into it because you only have to listen to one classical selection and it's surrounded by those pop songs that are easy to listen to. Collections. Listen to composers' collections of music. I talked about Bach's Prelude and Fugues earlier. That is an example of a collection. Or Beethoven's symphonies. That's a collection. If you like one symphony of Beethoven's, you'll probably like another. This is what I mean by collections. Find that composer and style you like and just listen to it. Similar to collections, find a musician or a group that you like that records classical music. For me, Marina Piccinini. She's a European flautist. I fell in love with her recordings in my first year of university and I still listen to her. She has an awesome album released in 2011 where she recorded all of Bach's flute sonatas with 2 guitarists. What? Love that album, and anytime I'm playing a Bach sonata, I go ahead and add that to my playlist right away. No questions asked. My last tip is classical radio station. I recently went on family vacation. The older people of the family call the shots, and since I was the youngest one there, too bad, so sad, I don't get to pick the radio channel. But I didn't mind because they picked the classical radio station. Woohoo! My siblings were left to cry over that. I was having the time of my life because I got to listen to classical music non-stop for the entire weekend. It was great. And these classical radio stations, they really have a good mix of well-known and more obscure or niche music to listen to. At one point, a string quartet arrangement of Taylor Swift's Wildest Dreams even came on, and I really enjoyed that. That's like my two worlds colliding, classical music and Taylor Swift. That's all the tips I have thought of up until this point in time. If I think of any more tips, I will add them into my article, and you'll just have to download it so that you can have a full list of tips and tricks. I just think classical music is so healing for the soul. Just as many emotions that exist in popular music exist in classical music, and then some. And people say that classical music is boring, but I want you to know that it really is not, and if you start listening to it, I promise you, you will agree with me on this. Now I want to say thank you for watching. Please go download my articles, they're free on my website, and I'll comment that down below to make sure you guys have that. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. If you don't have anything to comment, why not a red emoji for my outfit today? Next week we will be practicing together, so go practice now anyways though, don't wait for me. And bye.